Ever look at a Pokemon's base stats and think that doesn't make any sense? That's what we're gonna look at throughout this video. Pokemon stats that don't make any sense when you stop to look at them. We start with the HP stat. Let me ask you a question. Who do you think has more HP? One of the best competitive tanks in the game? The literal god of life? The freaking creator of the Pokemon universe? Or a chubby little baby? Well, if you said anything but the baby, then you're wrong. Of these four, Munchlax has the highest HP with a stat of 135. Second is Xerneas with an HP of 126. Arceus is third with an HP of 120. And finally, Amoonguss only has a base HP stat of 114. Other Pokemon Munchlax inexplicably has better HP than include Mewtwo, the supposed strongest Pokemon, Regigigas, the Titan who pulled the continents together, and Audino, who's supposed to be the Gen 5 Chansey. Next up, we have the attack stat, which I'm pretty excited to talk about. Onix is probably the poster child for Pokemon stats making no sense. Tell me, who do you think should have the higher attack stat? A nearly 30-foot, 500-pound serpent made of rock and stone, or a little baby spider who is one of the smallest Pokemon? Now granted, the stat difference isn't too major, but Joltik's attack is just about higher than Onix's. Like I said, Onix is pretty much the poster child for this discussion, and that applies to more than just attack. Aside from defense and debatably speed, Onix's base stats suck. I imagine the reason for this is due to Onix's first boss status in Kanto. Onix was made to be a literal wall without a good strategy, especially if you didn't choose Squirtle or Bulbasaur. But due to this, it left Onix wanting as a fully evolved Pokemon in Gen 1. However, on the opposite end of the spectrum is Trapinch. Trapinch has one of, if not the highest attack for a first stage evolution. Trapinch has an attack of 100, the same as Flygon, giving Trapinch a higher attack than fully evolved Pokemon such as Steelix, the metal evolution of Onix who's meant to be stronger, Pyroar, a Pokemon based on the King of the Jungle, and Tinkaton, a pixie holding a giant hammer who hunts Corviknight. And yeah, speaking of Tinkaton hunting down Corviknight, it's been discussed how Corviknight has the advantage against Tinkaton, not only typing wise, but honestly stat wise too. Aside from special attack and special defense, all of Corviknight's stats are actually higher. Next we have the defense stat, where like the HP category, a baby Pokemon has a surprisingly high stat. Bonsly has a defense stat of 95, which is pretty high for a baby, giving Bonsly a higher defense stat than Mewtwo. Again, the supposed strongest Pokemon being out by a baby. Man, Mewtwo fell off pretty hard, huh? But anyways, with the defense category, we can finally praise Onix. With a defense of 160, Onix has tougher skin than defense Deoxys. But not just Deoxys, Onix also has better defense than 100% Zygarde. You know, the guardian of the ecosystem. Finally, Onix has better defense than one Pokemon in particular, Literal God. Actually, Literal God has the lowest defense of these four Pokemon. But anyways, you know who else has a surprising defense stat? Going back to the babies, we have the titular baby Pokemon, Togepi. Togepi has a defense stat of 65, which is higher than some fully evolved or even legendary Pokemon. So despite being the poster child for literal baby Pokemon, Togepi's defense is better than Pokemon such as Hariyama, who's meant to be a sumo wrestler, Wailord, a literal whale and one of the biggest Pokemon, and Deoxys' base form and attack form. And remember that in the manga and other forms of Pokemon media, Deoxys is portrayed as being on par with Mewtwo in terms of strength. And finally, one of the funniest examples of weird Pokemon defense, Shuckle, this weird little turtle worm thing, has one of the best defense stats in the game. With a defense of 230, Shuckle has better defense than most legendaries. Now we have the special attack stat. Now question, how high do you think Abra's special attack is? 70? 80? Nope, it's 105. This gives Abra, a first stage evolution frailer than paper, a higher special attack than some fully evolved starters. This includes Blastoise, whose cannons can pierce steel and concrete, and Fernape, a Pokemon based on Goku Goku and Sun Wukong, and Decidueye, who can fire an arrow in 1/10 of a second. But it's not just starters, Abra's better than some pseudo-legendaries. There are 7 total pseudo-legendaries with lower special attack than Abra's. Speaking of which, some of these actually surprised me. Dragonite having a higher special attack than Tyranitar and Garchomp makes sense. But Komodo's special attack is tied with Dragonite, and Gyarados' I know they're not a pseudo, special attack is only 60? So much for a Hyper Beam that incinerates any target. Now we move on to the second special stat, Special Defense. Now who do you think has higher special defense? Literal gods who can majorly influence the Pokemon world, or some dogs who are barely over 3 feet tall? Cause as it turns out, some dogs are better at taking magic than gods. And you wanna know what else is surprising? Slacking, a giant freaking gorilla, only has a special defense stat of 65, which ties this fully evolved Pokemon to first stage starters like Bulbasaur. It also gives Slacking lower special defense than some baby Pokemon, most notably Badoo and Munchlax. Munchlax I can understand with how much of a special tank Snorlax is, but Badoo? A baby plant with literally no arms. I know Slacking doesn't like working out, but come on. Finally, for battle stats, we have the speed stat. Now, there are a couple dex entries that talk about a Pokemon's speed, and as you can imagine with dex entries, they're pretty inconsistent. Pidgeot can supposedly fly at Mach 2 speed, twice the speed of sound. Pidgeot's base speed is 101, which in fairness is pretty fast. But by this logic, any Pokemon faster than Pidgeot should also be able to move at Mach 2. For some Pokemon, like say Garchomp, it might make sense. But you know who's faster than both Pidgeot and Garchomp? Lopunny, my favorite and the most wholesome normal type Pokemon. So Lopunny is faster than sound, confirmed. But you know who's even faster than Lopunny? Dugtrio. Think about that. But here's where dex entries make the speed stat seem so inconsistent. Arcanine's entries mention them being able to run 6,200 miles in a day, a feat that will require a speed of 258 miles per hour or 415 kilometers. Arcanine's base speed is 95. Don't think about Miltank being faster. However, here's where it gets weird. Dragonite is able to circle the globe in just 16 hours, a feat that requires a speed of 1,556 miles per hour or 2,504 kilometers, which is also Mach 2 by the way. But Dragonite only has a base speed of 80. So can any Pokemon with a higher base speed than 80 move this fast? I mean, by this logic, Venusaur is faster than Mach 2. So any Pokemon with at least a base speed of 80 can move at Mach 2, except for Arcanine, who isn't even at half of Mach 1. Here's another one. Latios can supposedly fly at Mach 4 and has a base speed of 110. So Cinccino is faster than 4 times the speed of sound, confirmed. It also means that while Lopunny can move at Mach 2, Mega Lopunny can move at Mach 4. But let's talk about something on the opposite end of speed. Escavalier is set to fly around at high speeds to strike opponents, and yet Escavalier only has a base speed of 20, making Escavalier slower than Pokemon like Slowbro and Slowking, Pokemon who literally have slow in their names. Escavalier is also slower than Magcargo, a literal snail. Okay, last one. Let's discuss Miltank having a speed stat of 100. We already mentioned how Miltank is faster than Arcanine and Dragonite. So again, if we go by Pokédex logic, this means Miltank can reach Mach 2. But in game, some Pokemon Miltank can outspeed or speed tie include Charizard, Leon's Charizard versus Whitney's Miltank, anyone? Rayquaza, who's consistently shown destroying world-ending meteors, and Genesect, an upgraded version of an ancient hunter. Crazy how many Pokemon are slower than an actual cow. With battle stats covered, let's go over inconsistent heights and weights. Starting with the heights. One of the most notorious Pokemon heights is Furret. Furret has a seemingly absurd height of 5'11", but as speculated by fans for a long time, and even confirmed by Furret's official life-size plush, this height actually refers to Furret's length, but there were still jokes about Furret being taller than certain Pokemon, such as Charizard, who stands at 5'7". More absurd than that is Nidoking, who is a Nido short king with a height of only 4'7". Another short king is debatably Groudon. You may see this as an odd statement with Groudon standing at 11'6", but that's the thing. The Pokemon who created the land is shorter than an alien made of a bunch of wires. Finally, let's finish off these absurd stats with the weight category. Now, who do you think weighs more? A 30-foot tall snake made of metal or an 8 feet tall horse covered in mud? Well, guess what? The mud horse weighs almost 2.5 times as much as the metal snake. And you wanna know who's even shorter but still weighs more than Steelix? Snorlax only stands at 6'11" and yet weighs over 1,000 pounds. Dang, Steelix must be real hollow then. Maybe Steelix is light enough that they can flow. This leads us to one of the most infamous Pokemon weights. Wailord is 47'7", though like Furret, this may be referring to the length. However, Wailord only weighs 877.4 pounds, or 398 kilograms, even lighter than Steelix. This led to an infamous discussion that Wailord may be lighter than air, meaning the float whale Pokemon should be able to float in the air. In 2013, the J-Wits roughly estimated that Wailord would be lighter than air, and as someone who watched this video as a kid, I kind of just took it as fact for the longest time. And in 2018, the University of Leicester came to the same conclusion. But here's where the debate truly started, because Reddit came in and challenged this academic paper, concluding that Wailord would not be lighter than air. So to finally settle this debate, the man, the myth, the legend himself, Matt the Goat Pat, used Wailord's Gen 8 model to get their exact volume, and from this concluded that Wailord, without a shadow of a doubt, is not lighter than air, being well above its density. Bro really did come a long way from saying Wario is 10 feet tall. So in the end, Wailord being the float whale Pokemon refers only to water. Yeah, these dex entries were definitely written by 10-year-olds. And there you have it, folks. Pokemon base stats that don't make any sense. Which of these stats do you think makes the least amount of sense? Or do you think any of them actually do make sense? Are there any other stat inconsistencies I didn't go over? Ever notice that Charizard and Typhlosion have the exact same stat spread? Let me know in the comments below. And become a member if you're interested. It's only $2 a month. Have a nice day, you wonderful people. Oh, and here's one more speed inconsistency I almost forgot about. Doduo's dex entries often discuss how they can run 60 miles per hour. Doduo's base speed is 75, so hey, at least Doduo not being able to reach Mach 2 is consistent. However, where it gets weird is Dodrio's speed stat. Dodrio has a base speed of 100, putting their speed stat between Dragonite and Pidgeot, which based on what we discussed, should mean Dodrio can reach Mach 2, but despite having a higher base speed than Arcanine, Dodrio is canonically slower than Arcanine and Doduo. Dodrio's dex entries mention how they can only run at 40 miles per hour, so despite being nearly as fast as Pidgeot, Dodrio is somehow slower than their own pre-evolution. Yeah, again, these dex entries were definitely written by 10-year-olds. I can only see about 14 tentacles!